All right, it looks like we have most people logged on, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Claudia, and I'm the Content Marketing Manager here at Proformex. And we are so excited to have you all join us for the first installment of our brand new webinar series, Marketing with Morris. Before we get started, I just want to review a couple housekeeping items. Please keep your audio lines muted and turn all your cameras off for the duration of the presentation. If you have questions as we go through, please feel free to submit them in the chat box and we'll address them at the end in a short Q&A session. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you the host of this webinar series and our Chief Marketing Officer here at Proformex, David Morris. Take it away, David.
All right. Thanks, Claudia. I appreciate it. I feel like that was like an intro from the first the scene in was it Casino where Robert De Niro takes over that hosting show. I don't know. That was pretty good. I enjoyed it. Anyway, first of all, welcome everybody to the first ever Marketing with Morris, where today we're going to discuss marketing strategies for life insurance professionals. Like I said, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Proformex, and a few months ago, some folks in our office were asking me, you know, why are we do all these webinars, we do all this content, we put it out there. How come we never talk to our agents and our customers about how they can help themselves? We get questions about that. I'm on the phone with our agents and GAs on a regular basis, and they're like, hey, we see you guys out there all the time. Anything you can do to, any nuggets of wisdom you could share with us? And so, you know, throughout this COVID-19 stuff, I was thinking about ways that we could, you know, kind of give back a little bit. And so here we are today. So hopefully our goal, this is pretty simple, straightforward. It's going to be conversational. But at the end of the day, at the end of the half hour, our goal is for you to walk away with one or two nuggets that you can implement to help your business. And so like Claudia said, if you have any questions, just feel free, just put them in the chat box and we'll make sure we answer them. So without further ado, I'm super excited to introduce my friend, Ari Lewis. Ari is one of the young guns in Cleveland tech and entrepreneurship, an expert in strategic communications. He is a contributor to Crane's business, and he's also co-founder, managing partner of the Green Block Group, and as well as co-founder of Ohio X. I'll let Ari jump into that all the details of what they do as we go through. But the reason I asked Ari to be on the first episode with us is he has some amazing insights and ideas on how to effectively create and distribute content. So with that intro, Ari, I think I did a decent enough job at it, but what did I miss? Because I only went through like not even a quarter of the bio that we got there.
Yeah, well, first off, you know, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Yeah, just to, I guess, add to what you said. So I run Green Block Group, which is a strategic communication firm. You know, our clients, we've worked with state governments to, you know, small companies to large companies and everything in between. I'm also the co-founder of Ohio X, which you mentioned. So our job is to unite, promote, and advocate for technology and innovation across the state of Ohio. And from a communications point of view, you know, my expertise and what I'm really interested in is how to build brands on digital platforms. So twice a week, I write essays, and if you go to my website, arilewis.com, you can read, you know, what I'm posting. But yeah, that's sort of, you know, from the communication point of view, my background, just to add to you. To
Awesome.
What you said.
That's great. So let's just start with that. You know, from your background, you know, you remind me of myself a little bit in the sense, like, you know, I don't say you're all over the place in a bad way, but you have interests that go from here to here to here to here. Like, how did you realize, or when did you realize you had a passion for what you do now?
Yeah, so I was in the cryptocurrency space before this, and had a company which I sold, and ended up working as a consultant after that. One of my clients was the state of Ohio. And through that, I realized, you know, I had a interesting niche of, you know, helping companies and organizations look at technology and then how to communicate, you know, using these technologies, these newer technologies, to build their brand and, show themselves as a 21st century work environment.
Got it. Perfect. So that's it's really interesting, right? Because there's all these ways to communicate with people, whether it's, radio, TV, digital, billboards, right? Newspaper, even if depending on who you are, direct mail. But before, right, it's almost antiquated. Well, it is antiquated. I don't want to say it is antiquated, but I guess the first thing, before we can do any of that, like I get questions all the time. People are like, DM, my friends and people in business call me DM. They're like, DM, I want to get started. I want to put together a marketing plan. We don't have these big tech company budgets, et cetera. And I always tell them, they're like, what can we do? Should we do digital? Should we do direct mail? Should we do whatever it is? And the first thing I tell them, I ask them a simple question. I go, well, let me ask you, who's your customer, right? And we've had this conversation offline, and it amazes me, part of the time people really don't know who their customer. So I guess my question to you is, and it's kind of two-part. Why do you think it's so important to identify and define who your customer or client is? And adding on to that, how do you go about, like, what's your process in getting there?
Yeah, well, before I answer that, I have to say I wrote an essay Tuesday about newspapers, actually, and the Youngstown Business Journal. And there are some cases where newspapers are still effective from a B2B marketing standpoint, but I'm not going to jump into that. So I will say there are occasions where, a newspaper isn't horrible, but, in regards to your question, I'm big on, crawl before you walk and walk before you run, as cliche as that is, in that, strategy comes first and then tactics. So when you're talking about radio, digital, newspapers, these are tactical questions. And if I'm going to say, run a marathon, I'm not just going to go, oh, I'm just going to run the marathon. Like, where am I going to? How am I going to train to get there? And this is the same metaphor that can be used when thinking about marketing strategy. So you need to figure out first who's your customer, and that's talking to existing customers. And when I think about customer segments, I think about, what is the solution to the problem you're solving and who is paying for that? And I think that's a really good framing on how to figure out who your customer segment is. And you want to really you want to serve a niche really specifically first. So whether it's age group and then another segmentation. So it's like an age group plus an income denominator, whatever segments you use. And once you figure out your strategy, who your customer is, then you can start diving into the tactics of it and figuring out, okay, what am I going to do to get there? Whether that's, digital, newspapers, radio, et cetera.
Yep. So we have a thing here at Proformex, and we do this with all the companies, where it's a process that, one of the buzzwords today is creating a persona, right? Like it's literally saying, okay, who's your ideal customer? Exactly what you just said. Like talking to your customer and saying, okay, what are the similarities to who we're selling? Because those are the people, you don't get anywhere unless you can sell anything. You don't get market adaptation. You can't sell an insurance policy unless you know who so we literally go through the exercise of interviewing our clients, seeing what similarities they have, and creating that quote unquote persona. And we kind of take it a step further, and this is where I'd love to get your feedback. The persona isn't just kind of identifying who that person is, right? You said by segment, by age, by, we actually name our people. Like it could be, if it's an insurance agent, it might be, hey, this person's name is Ken. He's 45 to 50 years old. He, makes this, he does this. There's certain attributes. But when we get into that, it's also, we try to dig into, like, how does that person, like, how do you speak to that person, right? Because there's certain words that may work, may not work, certain like what might work for somebody that age who's a truck driver, which is an industry I was in before, might not work for the same person age-wise that's in the insurance business. So what are some things from a messaging standpoint? Like how do we figure out how to speak to a potential customer?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I always say, try to put your you're put yourself in their shoes, right? And I always, love referencing Mad Men. There's this scene in Mad Men, for those who have seen it before, where Don Draper, who's the main character, goes to work at this big marketing firm, and this researcher comes in, and he's talking about a beer that he's selling, and he's like, imagine, who's the beer for? Imagine you're in your 40s, maybe you have some college, you're from a Rust Belt state, Ohio, Wisconsin, Illinois. You like to drink a cold one after a hard day at work. And he's really defining the character. They'll give him a name, John Smith. And, John Smith maybe has 2 kids and a dog. And you need to think from their point of view. So yes, your view matters, but not really. What really matters more is, what is that person thinking? What does that person desire? And it's so important for you to connect with that person. So you have to figure out how you can create a, connection with that user persona that makes you come off as authentic and makes you come off as solving a problem for that user.
So now when you do that, when you're going through the initial process, do you do is there testing that goes involved? Is there any how, if there is, how, if let's say you are going to test messaging or test how to resonate, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah. So, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. From a user experience point of view, if I created a product, I like to always approach it from a solutions based strategy. So, talk to them about, what is their problem? And I don't like to give them the solution straight away. I like to, hear their problem. And then I like to, try to not tell them about the product, but explain the solution to them. And I just let them talk. A lot of it has to do with, you need to listen more than you talking. And, you have to do that with a bunch of different people. So, and a lot of it is hypothesis testing. So it's, you think this is your customer, you have conversations with them, you ask them different questions. And if you literally just Google user experience testing, user interview testing, they have tons of lists of questions on Google where, you can ask someone hey, when you go, let's take something like life insurance, how do you buy life insurance? When do you think about buying life insurance? What is the solution you're hoping life insurance solves? And you could learn so much by that. Because, most people, I would assume, I'm not in the life insurance business, are probably ask somebody on the golf course who is my financial advisor or my lawyer. It's probably a really referral heavy business. And then that teaches you, even though the end user is, the consumer, that's not really who I want to market to. I want to market to service providers because they're the people that are connecting all these consumers together. So as you start to ask these questions, you start realizing, who's the user too? Or who's the customer? Because the user and the customer might not even be the same person.
Yeah, that's a great point. So now we've gone through the first kind of 2 stages, right? We've gone through figuring out, number 1, who our customer is, and then number 2, how to speak to that person. My vocabulary is not very big, so I try to keep, things in very relatively small terms or simple terms. So now that we know who the customer is, kind of how to speak to them or where to go, or how to speak to them. Now it's where do we meet them, right? How do we get that information, the tactical part that you were talking to earlier? So let's just kind of chat through, if you would, as far as delivering this content, delivering this messaging, what are some of the ways that you think are, some simple basic things that somebody could do relatively simply, inexpensively, from that standpoint? And then also is there a way to measure that? Is there a way to define success, right?
Yeah. So I'll just talk about digital content,
Okay.
right? So it could be something as simple as starting a newsletter. So all of your existing customers that you have, maybe you email them once a month, right? And you just start with them. And at the end of the email, you could do something maybe you want to sell them more products or you want to get referrals from them. And then what you can do is when you get a new customer or someone who's an existing customer buys from you, you ask them, hey, where did you hear about us? And you can start measuring it by like, oh, I heard about it from the newsletter, or I heard about it from, X. And
Yep.
that's a really easy, simple way. So I always say like newsletters are really good. Now, if you're doing a newsletter, it's really important to offer unique information. One of the really easy ways to do that is like interviewing people, because interviewing is always unique content. So like maybe you can interview people that your audience would want to hear from. So say your whole thing is connecting with lawyers and that's who you're selling to, then maybe your content is catered, like your content will have nothing to do with your business. Your content's actually catered at adding value to lawyers.
Yep.
And then lawyers will sign up for it, but and like, you don't even mention really like what you do, just at the end, like, oh, we're in the life insurance business. And then it's called top of mind awareness. So then the first thing they think about when they think about life insurance is they're like, oh, I get this email about life insurance, and and it's from lawyers, and bam, now it's connected. So I think that's really the key, is that top of mind awareness, and it doesn't have to be, something specifically related to your business.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because we, on a day in, day out basis, like our mindset at Proformex, and we're a little bit bigger than an average shop, but we view everything from a content generation standpoint, whatever that means, right? We have things as complex and high level as white papers on a specific topic, like there's Reg BI information. That's a big thing going on in our world that's going down this month. But we also do fun things, for example, with our founder, Putting with Peppy, where we go to different locations around the city of Cleveland, highlighting our city, highlighting our people, getting to know them. And it actually happens to be one of our top 2 consumed pieces of content, right? It's, to your point, it's like, they're like, in the end, they know that Proformex is a technology business that that helps agents and producers with the visibility into their books of business. But what it really does is just gets them warm and familiar with the company, and then when they're ready or they're interested in engaging, right, you're there. And that's, I think, exactly what you're talking to, right?
Yeah, and one thing that I really like is like, you said Putting with Pepe. One thing, and even for B2B shops, I wouldn't be afraid to experiment with having some type of thing that represents your brand.
Yeah.
Because that's a good way to, have symbolism. So I'm just going to use Morning Brew. That's a newsletter for some of you that may or may not be familiar with them. Yeah. So, and I don't know them personally. I just know them through Twitter, but like Austin and Alex, I think is the other founder. One of the things they've done is write coffee. So, and brew. So when you think of that, you think of Morning Brew, and they've created this connection, and like they use that coffee emoji on social media a lot. So when you see that emoji, you think of them. I do the praise emoji a lot, and it sounds so ridiculous, but what's starting to happen is like people will think of the praise emoji and they'll think of me. So there's like all these clever tricks that psychologically you can do to create connections with the consumer or with a business through those types of symbolisms.
Yep. So, if I hear what you're saying, it's like, hey, create content, whatever that means to you, right? Keep it, I would say simple, but simple, right? Keep it authentic to you. So you're creating your brand, right?
I think most importantly is create content that solves a problem or teaches something to the end user or the person reading that content, and be authentic. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So really, if somebody were to say, if I were to ask you, hey, if I needed to get started with anything, it doesn't sound like there's really anything anybody needs to buy. It's really just kind of just to sit down and just try to formulate a little bit of a plan, right?
Yeah, I think paid acquisition channels are really good, but I don't think they should ever be first for the most part. I think you need to formulate a strategy and then test that with, organic content meaning, free content. So posting on social media. I mean, it also could be, right? It could be print content. I mean, if you're in an industry where, for whatever reason, it's people who aren't, digital native folks, and they read a newspaper every day, maybe that does mean, running it at a newspaper. But it's definitely, formulate your strategy, test it with organic content first, see if it resonates, and then start to experiment with paid acquisition channels. I would very rarely start with paid acquisition channels.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So at the end of the day, let's think through right now that we're an independent insurance agent, right? I sell everything from term life insurance, whole life insurance. It's myself and a handful of people in my office, from an admin. So it's, your local insurance person. What are like 2 or 3 simple things that they could just walk away with today that they could put into place that's just, not rocket science, but, could pay dividends relatively quickly?
Yeah. So I think, service providers, professional service firms, whether they like to admit it or not, right there, for the most part, commoditized businesses, their unique edge are their relationships. So I think it's figuring out ways to scale relationships. I like to call it creating a recurring relationship through content. So, as I said, newsletters are great ideas. There's also tools out there where you can like text people and use like chat bots. And that might be a bit too far in the weeds, but those are always great ideas, because even if the person knows it's not directly coming from you, they still associate with you and they still are thinking about you. So I think those are always amazing ideas. So it's stuff like doing a newsletter, stuff like, if you have their phone numbers, mobile phone numbers, it's, texting people. There are programs out there. Drips is one that comes to mind. It's actually based in Akron, that will like send mass texts asking people like, how are they doing? How can they be helpful?
Yeah. So that's a personal reach out though, right? It's not like a solicitation type of scenario.
Yeah, no. So I wouldn't like solicit random people. Yeah. The one thing you should never do is like just add a bunch of random emails that you bought or like got onto a list. Really bad. You get flagged. Never do that. Like always make sure that people
that's
are
another
okay with
episode. That's another whole episode that I'm going to get into down the road on how to get around that. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I think like newsletters or texting type services are like really easy, low hanging fruit that people can do. But I mean, even if you really want to even go 10,000 feet higher in the air, it's things like make sure you have a LinkedIn profile, make sure you have a website. If your consumers are young, maybe you do an Instagram. Maybe if they use LinkedIn pages, you make a LinkedIn page. So it's just like making sure your digital stuff, the really basics of the digital properties.
So you want to take your content, right, and push it there. Basically, for lack of a better term, the content that you're pushing out is the thought leadership of being of value, things that those folks would be interested in. So you create that the consistency out there, whether it's, a monthly newsletter or a quarterly newsletter. Do you have a recommendation on, like, let's say a newsletter? Would you do that monthly? Would you do that quarterly? What are you thinking on that?
Yeah. So I always tell people start small and then expand if it's successful. Never start too quickly and then have to scale back. So if you do it daily, don't go and become weekly. And if you do it, monthly, then it's okay to become weekly.
Yeah.
So it's okay to do more. It's not okay to do less. And I think that's really important for people when they think about this stuff of how can you, reach people enough where they're getting value, but not tired from you. Because you'd be surprised. Some people don't want to hear from you daily, even if you are giving value every day.
Right.
It's just, they get too many emails and stuff, or they get too many text messages, whatever it is. So I would start small and then expand.
Yeah.
But the last thing I'd like to add to that is, most importantly with content, make sure it's adding value and that's really your differentiator of, you're showing to existing customers and potential customers that you know something about your business and you're the expert. And if they think of you as the expert, they're going to reach out to you.
Yeah. It's at the end of the day, right? No matter what you're doing, it's building trust. Right? They think you're the expert. People still, regardless of what the platform is, what the technology is, regardless of what the business is, it's a trust. You have to be able to build trust in that relationship, especially, like I would say, in life insurance. There's nothing more valuable than insuring somebody's life. So hopefully you never need it, but when you do, it better be there, right? So yeah, that's a great point. All right, so I know we're running against the clock here. Claudia, do we have that survey we want to put up in the chat box?
Yes, we do. I will send a link out to everybody here right now.
So yeah, if you at the end of the day today, if you wouldn't mind taking 30 seconds, it's literally a 2-question survey. Just it helps give us feedback on the event, whether you liked it, you didn't, you thought it stunk, we weren't that funny, whatever it is you want to say, we'd really appreciate that. And how about, are there any questions in there that anybody has?
As of right now, I haven't received any questions in the chat box, but now that it's open, everybody, with that survey link, feel free to throw a question in if you have one.
So while we're wrapping up right now, if anybody has any questions, like Claudia said, feel free to put those in there. What I will say while we're waiting is that if you would like to reach out to Ari, how could people reach out to you? I know you have a LinkedIn.
Yeah. So
with any questions offline.
Yeah, I'll put my email in the chat. So just me at arilewis.com. So me at Ari Lewis Lewis.com. And it's in the chat. Also, I have a website, which is arilewis.com, where you can subscribe to my email newsletter, which I send out twice a week, about building brands on digital platforms.
By the way, if I can jump in, it's really good. I thought Ari's, I read it, I subscribe to it, and it's actually how I met Ari. I got this. And one of the things I did afterwards, this was a great thing that I saw Ari do, and anybody can do it, is Ari literally responded after I signed up saying, hey, how did you hear about us? How did you hear about this? I can't remember the exact question, but it was literally a personalized thing that I responded, and that's how we got to talking. So it's, it really works from that standpoint. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. Oh, and that's a great example of like how automation can come off as personal. So every time someone signs up for my email newsletters, they get an email from me, and like, I don't send it, but like, they feel like it's personal. And, there's that like dopamine that comes in, a lot of this is I study a lot of psychology, and there's a few like psychiatrists and psychologists that I read and like, but it's all about like, how do you get that dopamine from the consumer that excites them, that makes them feel like, oh wow, I'm special or connected. Even in something like life insurance, people might not be thinking about that, but really that's like why you're getting hired. Because your product is probably not, the product from John Smith is probably the same as the product from Joe Q, a taxpayer. I don't know why I thought of that name, but and they're buying it from you because they're getting a reaction from that interaction. They're happy about it, or they trust you, and something's going off in their brain saying like, oh, I'm really excited about this guy, trust this guy, whatever it is. That dopamine is happening. So that's so important when you're trying to connect with consumers and allowing that to happen.
Awesome. Well, I'll close with this. You have Ari's information there. He's a good follow on Twitter as well, if you want to follow him there, or reach out to him on LinkedIn. And the same for me. If you want to, if you have any questions for me, you want to discuss offline, my email, I'll put it on there. It's very simple. My name, D as in David Morris at Proformex.com, or you can just look me up on LinkedIn, or the easiest ways to get in touch with me. That's really it. I mean, this has been a blast. I really appreciate the insight and the help, and hopefully everybody got one or two things out of it that they could take away from it. Anything else you want to add before we go?
No, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Thanks for everyone for joining.
Yep. Thanks everybody. And we'll see you soon. Take care.